I'm great, Sarah.
Good. Well, I'm excited for today. Just to give you guys a little bit of background about Dr. Phillips, he has been a doctor for 30 plus years. He's a specializes in chiropractic. And I know recently, Dr. Phillips, I just seen you on the cover of a magazine. You have one of the top practices in the country, don't you? That's pretty
Yes.
exciting. So just to brag on him just a little bit because he won't do it himself. But I'm excited for today's call. What are we going to be talking about?
Well, I really wanted to talk. So many people have health challenges and they focus on symptoms and they focus on the way they feel. And certainly that's important. I don't want to discount that. But the way you feel is like the warning light on the dash of your car. And so if you had a warning light, to make this analogy and make it full circle, if you had a warning light on your car that lit up, you wouldn't just, pull the plug, pull the fuse, put a piece of tape over it. That wouldn't solve the problem. Certainly if you had a check engine light and you were going on a big road trip and headed out and somebody said, "Oh, you're fine, no big deal," you wouldn't head out on a big trip with your family with the possibility of being stranded.
Right.
And so symptoms are just that. They're warning lights. They're telling us something is wrong, but that is not what is wrong. And so often in healthcare these days, in this year of 2023 and the many years preceding it, we focus on those symptoms. And so consequently, as patients and healthcare consumers, we focus on those symptoms. And we don't really ever get to the underlying cause of the problem. And so consequently, we're like a dog chasing his tail. We're constantly going in this symptom merry-go-round of never achieving true health. And, my whole passion in healthcare and the thing that drives me for the 30 plus years that I've been in practice is really helping people to find health, because nobody wants to be dependent on anything to be healthy.
Right.
We want to be independent and viable human beings that are partaking of all the different wonders of our environment. And to do that, there's certain things that have to function optimally in our body. We have to be properly digesting and assimilating things. We have to be properly detoxifying and eliminating things. We have to be properly taking in air and oxygen and getting rid of carbon dioxide. All these things have to be happening optimally, or we're going to have a suboptimal experience in our environment. And we so often think it all has to do with chemistry because, the pharmaceutical industry kind of owns the healthcare space. And is it healthcare what they're delivering? No, it's sick care. All they're
Yes.
doing is managing symptoms. They're not really getting to this underlying cause that we're talking about today.
Right.
And so we are skirting the true issue of health all the time with most of the treatment modalities that are out there for us to partake of as consumers. And I love to talk about energy because it's one of the primary drivers of a true healthy organism. And so we are energy beings. How do I know that? Because we conduct energy. If you didn't conduct energy, you wouldn't touch a hot wire and get shocked. Okay, it would just,
Right.
nothing would happen. But
Right.
we conduct energy. We're energy conductors, but we're also energy manifestors. We create energy. We actually have enough energy in our bodies that we could power a small city
What? Are,
electrically.
are you serious?
That is true.
That's
And,
amazing.
and so energy is very important. But really, prior to us understanding things like the endocannabinoid system and acupuncture meridian system and some of the things like that, we never really had a focus on energy when it came to healthcare. Now we're focusing more and more on on energy, because we realize that's where things really shift. So I could, if you were here in my presence, show you how a negative thought instantly shifts your energy in a negative way. I could show you how a unhealthy food would instantly shift your energy in a negative way. I could show you how an unhealthy physical thing would shift your energy in a negative way. So if we put abnormal stress on a joint, for example,
Right.
and those are the major stressors of the body: physical, emotional, and chemical. And so it's important that we kind of manage our energy, but it's also important that we feed our energy. And that's something that we haven't really talked about in healthcare, to the best of my knowledge, for a long, long time. There's a little bit of that discussion when we talk about homeopathics, but homeopathics more manipulate energy than it does energize an energy system. And so one of the things that we've discovered that is the most energetic plant out there is the hemp plant.
Yes.
And so the hemp plant has the complete capacity and ability to feed this energy system that we're talking about. And just like, I'll use a great example. And my neighbor's an engineer, and as a hobby, he kind of fixes things and then resells them. You know, these things that he buys pallets full of tools and then fixes them and resells them, and he just loves it. You know, he just loves fixing things.
Right.
And so I was talking to him one day, and I have this Milwaukee weed eater and leaf blower. When I first bought the thing, I could weed eat all the way around my house and then blow everything that I needed to blow on one battery charge.
Ah.
Then it got to the point after several months, I could only weed eat on one battery charge.
Oh.
And then I had to recharge and do the blowing portion. And now it's to the point that battery has gotten so weak, in spite of me charging it on a regular basis, that I can barely blow off our deck before it dies.
Oh, wow.
And so what I learned from him is that you get cells in these batteries that you click in the slots, you know, that they make and you charge and everything. You get cells that start to go bad. And all you have to do is replace one or two of those cells, and then the battery's all brand new. And that's one of the things that he does. And the thing is about us is, can you imagine, after all of our decades of life, don't you think maybe some of our cells are not as charged as they used to be?
Right.
I mean, what do you typically hear from an aging person? I just don't have the energy that I used to. I just can't get things done like I used to get them done. I just can't focus the way I used to focus. I just can't, because that energy, those metaphorical cells of energy, are becoming more and more depleted over time. And that's because we've just not known of a way to feed our energy system until now with these hemp-based products. And so the hemp-based products are energizing and feed this energy system. In essence, it's a way of plugging in and recharging our batteries every time we take that. Now, I want to go back to a statement that I made. We don't want to be dependent on anything. And I get that, but there are certain things that our body needs to live. You know, we got to breathe. If we don't breathe, just within a few minutes, our body's going to expire. If we don't hydrate, within a few days, our body's going to expire. Without eating, within a few more days, our body's going to expire, possibly months, our body's going to expire. So we have these needs. And because energy is somewhat conserved and recycled, it's just a gradual decline. And so I always use this analogy because it's very helpful, is, and you're a young mom, so I remember when I was a kid, I'm pretty tall if you've never seen me. And so every time I'd go to visit my aunts and uncles, they would say, "I bet you've grown a foot since I saw you last," you know?
Right.
and you've changed so much. And now that we have grandkids and we see them like every week or whatever, and we're like, wow, they look so different, in just a week. And
Right.
so, but the parents don't see it because they're with them every day, every minute, all that type of stuff. So they don't see these changes because there's not a void in their comparison. And so with us and these energies, it's such a gradual change over time that we just aren't really, really honing in on the loss of energy that we're experiencing within our bodies. It's just this gradual depletion until the end,
Right.
and so the beauty of our energy system, it is conservative in nature, but we're still at a deficit over time. And so we want to be feeding that on a constant basis and upregulating that on a constant basis. And that's what we're able to do with hemp. So why, just like with water and food and air, why would you ever stop feeding your energy system? There's just basic needs if you want to live a long, healthy life. Now, if you don't have to. You can live a pretty long life, obviously, without these products, but you're going to live a longer, healthier life. And the thing that we're realizing in our current environment, because we don't have people dying of acute things as much as we used to be people would die in like their 60s. That was like the average lifespan, and most people would die of infective organisms, so infections that ran their body down, they couldn't recover from. Well, we've overcome most of that and have that happen way less because of advances in science and advances in really healthcare in the area of filtering our water and
Yes.
better food and things like that.
Absolutely.
And so we aren't exposed to these massive infective organisms, just drinking our water and things that we used to be experiencing. So consequently, what we're finding is people are living longer, but they're not really having a longer, healthier life.
Right.
So the last 20 years of their life, they're really kind of suffering from multiple degenerative conditions, whether it be arthritis or autoimmune diseases or different degenerative conditions where they can't get around and all sorts of things that we hear about with advertising of medications, of course.
So, there's plenty of those, Dr. Phillips.
Yeah. And so consequently, what we want people to have is not really, yes, you'll have a longer life, but we really where you'll see the biggest difference is a longer health span.
Quality
life. Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's where this energy really comes into play. And it's really so important is that increasing that health span and you're not having that gradual decline at the end of latter time of your life and living 20, 30 years where you really almost wished you weren't living, And so we want your life to be long and productive and healthy, and you're still vibrant and doing all sorts of things that you choose to do until, close to the end. Maybe you just have a couple months where you don't feel well, that's the goal.
Right.
Or ideally, we all dream of passing in our sleep, that's
Right. Yes, after a long, healthy life. Exactly. Yeah.
And so with energy, the other caveat that we're kind of building up to is we have more healing potential. So we're constantly breaking down and we're constantly degenerating, but we have to replace the degeneration and build back up new cells. And so we lose about 50 to 70 billion cells every single day.
Oh.
But we have to replace those every single day. And if we don't have the ability to replace those, then of course we're becoming less and less of ourselves as a healthy person. And so that's why oftentimes you see people as they get near the end stages of life, they become smaller and smaller and smaller because literally they're dying off one cell at a time because they can't replace the cells that they're losing.
That's why people get smaller?
Yes,
I
yeah.
had no idea. I learned something today. That's fascinating. Wow.
And so there's so many advances in this longevity arena that will help you to regenerate optimally for longer. And one of those is hemp and CBD oil. The other thing that's super, super important is regulation of the body. And, it's just like a fever. If you get too hot, it could kill you. If you get too cold, you could die. If, your pH, for example, your acid-base balance in your body, if that gets out of range, you can die. Your nervous system gets out of balance. You could, have all sorts of problems in your body. Anything. You could talk about anything, and it could lead to a severe problem in your body. And wouldn't it be nice if we had a system that just kind of looked after everything and just kind of made sure that everything was balanced? That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't know this for a long, long time. In fact, we just discovered it like 20 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, but we didn't know it. In fact, when I went through professional school, there was no mention of a system that did that. We talked about a concept of homeostasis, which is balance within the body, but we talked about it from a systems point of view. So the respiratory system was responsible for creating homeostasis in the respiratory system. The circulatory system was responsible for creating homeostasis within the circulatory system, and so forth and so on. And we had different regulations and feedback loops to create that balance within each of those systems. But nobody talked about an overriding system that kind of looked at all of the systems to create balance within an organism. Which doesn't it make sense that we would have a system like that?
It does make sense. You're going to give us good news, aren't you?
Yes, I'm going to give you great news because we have a system like that. And it's just amazing to me that now that we have discovered it, that we didn't know about it way, way long ago. But because it's an energy system, it's a subtle system. There aren't like structures to it. And that's why it was, kind of the man behind the curtain, Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. And so there's not huge structures. There's just receptors because these receptors have to be monitoring everything. It's kind of like a Ring doorbell. You might see a little thing here and a little thing here, but there's no wires and there's no central processing unit that everything goes back to. It's just all these receptors. And then that makes up what we call the endocannabinoid system. And the endocannabinoid system, because there's no like main central area, like the nervous system has the brain, for example, because there's no central area, it all responds to the messaging of phytocannabinoids or endocannabinoids. So we do make cannabinoids in our body, in our brain, but we just don't make enough. Just like we make vitamin D in our liver, but we just don't make enough, especially in nowadays. Who gets outside with 80% of their skin showing for 2 hours a day?
Nobody. Nobody. Everybody's doing
and that's the requirement. That's the requirement for you to make an optimal level of vitamin D on a daily basis.
Wow.
80% of your skin showing for an hour a day. So we don't optimally produce endocannabinoids because we just aren't in the outside environment to do it. And so guess what? We need to consume some.
Right.
We absolutely must consume some I guess it's your choice, you don't have to, but if you want to be optimally healthy, which is always my goal, if you want to be optimally healthy, you have to be consuming a regular amount of these phytocannabinoids. Phyto meaning plant-based, so all natural. Cannabinoids meaning a chemical, a molecule that attaches to and and creates a signal to the endocannabinoid system.
That's remarkable.
So if we do that, we're going to create more balance and more homeostasis within the endocannabinoid system. Now, let me bring in a story that talks about why that's important. So I do what's called high intensity interval training, and I do it at a place which I love. This is not advertisement for them, but if you like high intensity interval training, I would encourage you to check it out. It's called Orange Theory Fitness, and they have gray, blue, green, orange, and red zones. And it's all based on your heart rate. So obviously red is max heart rate. Orange is a higher heart rate, but you should be able to sustain that for a longer period of time. Green is kind of a heart rate that is what they would call your base. And so you're just like jogging along or doing something that you probably could do for a long time. Couldn't do it forever, but you could probably do it a long time.
Right.
Blue and gray is something like you could do forever. You know, it's like you're walking, or you might be walking briskly, but it's still something you could do for a long, long, long time. And so, you know, if you're down here in these gray and blue zones, and even a little bit into the green zones, that's kind of homeostasis. You know, your body's not being stressed very much, and your body's kind of chill about it, and you're being active, but it's not a big deal. But then you start getting the orange and red zones. Now the body and the heart's pumping, and you're breathing hard, and at some point you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't do this any longer. Please. Please say stop soon. and that's what happens when you get out of homeostasis. Your body is saying, oh my gosh, you're stressing me so badly. I cannot keep up with this mess you're creating in the body, whether it be cardiovascularly, respiratory, digestion, endocrine, nervous system. All the many systems of the body get overwhelmed because of this imbalance. And then that leads to first stress in the body, and then ultimately diseases in the body. Because if it goes on too long, the body has to figure out a way to adapt. Many people don't know this, but a disease, even cancer, is a perfect response to what you are doing to the body. The body is trying to deal with it. Your body has one mission in life, and that's to live as long as possible. And it will do everything it can to live as long as possible. And sometimes to do that, it has to create things like cancer and diabetes and heart attacks and strokes because of what you're doing to it. But if you keep it in this gray, blue, and green zone, it doesn't have to do all of that compensatory things to stay healthy. And so the goal is to stay in this balance, in this ideal operating system for 80-90% of your life. Occasionally you can go crazy and have a bad meal or a crazy dessert or whatever, but you don't want to do that all the time, or you're going to get out of balance and have a problem. And so the benefit of all this is you are solidifying the possibility of your body staying in these zones of health and not being stressed and being in a zone of dis-ease. Dis-ease leads to disease, okay? When you stress the body, it can't handle it. Just like a car. You know, we're in Indiana, and pretty soon this month, we're going to have the Indianapolis 500. These cars are $1 million cars, and some of them can't even go 500 miles. You would think for $1 million, they could go 500 miles, you know? They blow up. They blow up before they can go 500 miles, but it's because they are stressed that whole 500 miles. They're not lollygagging along at 70 miles an hour. They're pushing 200 plus miles an hour around a track, and that's hard on all those pieces of equipment.
Well, Dr. Phillips, this was so amazing today. I love how you gave the analogies, and it's easy to understand. But the good news that I'm taking away from this is we're in control of our health. And even if, and listen, you guys, I didn't say the disclosure at the beginning, but we're not here to treat, cure. Dr. Phillips doesn't give a medical advice. He's just here sharing out of the kindness of his heart, you know, how we can be healthy. And so, you know, always consult your physician before starting a new regimen or whatnot. But from what I'm taking away from this, Dr. Phillips, is our health is in our own hands. And we have the ability, even if we are out of balance, to step aside and reevaluate and get situated so we can put our body back into balance and take the proper nutrients and vitamins, minerals, whatever it may be. CBD, obviously, as you guys know, is essential. I take 2 dropperfuls every night before I go to bed, and I sleep like I'm dead, and I wake up feeling amazing. It's the best thing ever. So thank you guys for joining us today. Stay tuned for Kimmy's coming up with Dr. Phillips. They're going to be talking about the laser and the benefits of it. So thank you guys and have a beautiful Monday.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips.